Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Minecraft video. Today we are embarking on a new creative building adventure. I'm going to be calling this Sunset Valley, and it's basically going to be something that I work on when I'm looking for a break from my other video projects, as well as a way to practice and improve my building skills. As we go along in this video, I will further explain exactly what this idea is composed of, and where some of the inspiration came from for both the world and some of the builds created today. However, I don't want to talk your ear off for too long, so let's get building. To begin this project, I went ahead and planned out a few general shapes for buildings that could be pasted around. Once pasted, I would go back in and change them all, giving them different themes, colors, and details, but for now, this would be the easiest way to get the idea off the ground as quickly as possible, and to make this area the size that I wanted without spending months on just these background houses. It would also make it easier to visualize what exactly my plan is for all of you watching, so that I can show you rather than trying to explain it. It also means this video and series can focus more on the bigger builds and generally more interesting ideas rather than giving an even split to all of it. I went ahead and designed a few fences that could be pasted around as well. After that, it was on to the first house, which I decided to use birch for because it's one of my favorite blocks and also is a color that has a lot of various random stairs, slabs, and more to use to decorate with. Since it's neutral in color, it also means that we can add any color we'd like to it for windows, carpet, and anything else we may need, and it should look really good. This house was sort of like a test for me to see exactly how I was going to go about doing the inside and outside of each. Also, the area around each house wouldn't be decorated in their clips, however I would come back later to add some rocks, grass, and small trees to the area as needed. Alright, so I just wanted to come in real quick, because we've just been doing time-lapse after time-lapse after time-lapse, just to kind of talk about what's going on here a little bit in present tense, so I don't have to do so much talking when I'm editing. But as you can probably tell, we're kind of building what is going to be a sort of suburban area here. I've gone ahead and built all these different houses, and I've kind of copied and pasted them around, rotated them, because, I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit here and build the same house 50 times. But as you can probably see, there are a few that are not just copied and pasted and are using some blocks that maybe we have not used yet, or probably won't be using. And so basically what this is I'm kind of just been in the mood to do some creative building, especially for a video, because it's been a bit. And so I thought, why don't we build something big? You know, this can sort of turn into kind of its own series, and I figured for the first episode we could build this sort of suburban area, maybe another one we'll build like an actual like kind of more city-like, like almost, I'm trying to think of like a few examples, like I guess like Toronto, New York, Chicago, I'm trying to think of bigger cities, I'm trying to think of some in Europe, London, England, Paris, stuff like that, like that would kind of be off somewhere else, and we could kind of connect it all up, basically, is what I was thinking. And so obviously we've got this first house here kind of mostly done. I obviously want some more decorations, especially in this space here. Maybe a custom tree. And I definitely want some custom trees, especially in this area, just because obviously if we're doing like a bigger, more built up, tighter packed city, we're not going to have that. But that's going to be something I'm going to have to kind of be doing in the background as I'm working on the rest of this, because trees are not something that comes very easily to me. So that's going to be something I'm going to have to kind of work on maybe over there, and that'll be another thing I'll copy and paste around once I'm kind of done everything. But generally my plan is I'm going to kind of go through and do all of these copied and pasted buildings, kind of rebuild, recolor them, and do an interior for probably most of them, using whatever block palette I've kind of laid out in front of them. I've gotten most of these colors, at the very least, from asking family and friends. They've kind of given me some suggestions, just so I didn't have to come up with them all on my own. Though I definitely did come up with a few, specifically the red one and that gray one there. But yeah, so we're going to kind of go through and do all those, and then I wanted to save these kind of other ones for the end. And so basically, when I kind of came up with this idea, I was imagining that it would almost be like building a set for like a movie or a show or something. And so obviously, like, some of the houses are just going to kind of be in the background. They're not really going to be used for anything. And I think that a lot of these copied and pasted ones, in particular, this one, I think, is just going to be in the background. Whereas the ones that we have not built yet, such as these three here, and that one at the end of the road there, and that one there, those five in particular, and probably that bigger building there, are going to be like where your sort of main characters live, the like main focus of whatever storyline is going on. And so these ones in particular, that orange one there is obviously my own. Let's sign here, my house. And then the other four are ones particularly from a few friends that I've actually asked specifically if they were to have a house in this sort of suburban area, what kind of vibe would it be? And so that's kind of what those ones are going to be. And I thought because those ones are going to be probably a little bit bigger, a little bit different to the rest of them, I thought we'd save those for last because those ones are going to be a little more interesting, and are going to have a lot more details than a lot of these other ones. I went right ahead on the second house using a polished tuff and tough bricks for the outside and some spruce on the inside. I made a cute little kitchen and dining room, a large bedroom, a bathroom, and a small seating area at the top of the stairs. I then went around using candles, paintings, flower pots, and more to decorate with in spots that felt empty or like they needed an extra pop of color. Then, moving on to the third house, I went with diorite and calcite for a brighter white house, and used deep slate for the roof to add some contrast. Then for the fourth, I went with some cyan terracotta and clay for something with a bit more variety, and added a driveway with an overhang to make it feel a little less boxy. I then went and did the rest off camera to speed the process up, so we could get on to some of the more fun builds. Probably about an hour ago now, I was able to finish up the exterior on the last few buildings over here, or at least the last few kind of filler buildings, this being the last. Of course, there's not really any decorations. We still need to put some fences in, and we of course need plants and trees and everything else, which is what I decided to work on next. However, I was having a bit of an issue with the oak trees. As you can see, if we take a look at this one here, it kind of just looks like a palm tree, to be honest. But at least it's giving tree. There was another one here that I actually just completely got rid of because I actually just hated it so much that I couldn't stare at it any longer. I got a birch tree, I got a few smaller trees, and then I was just working on this one, which I've just spent probably about half an hour on. And honestly, it's come out quite good. So I'm hoping that I can maybe replicate this, but maybe a tiny bit smaller, just over here, so that we have a few different options, just like we have with these three smaller oak trees and these two sort of pine trees here. And then I've also done a few little, like, bushes and things, and of course I can do some more kind of over there as I'm going. I then pasted trees around and free-handed some in spots where copy-pasting wouldn't work without ruining the houses, and then added rocks and other fauna to fill the empty spaces. After that, it was time for the big part of today's video. So, I messaged my friends asking them this question. If you were to buy a house and it could be any color you wanted, what color would you want it to be? And this was my first response. Yep, that's about what I was expecting. So, with a color now chosen, I went ahead and got to work building the first of the main houses. For this one, I went with something a bit more modern to fit in with what I originally intended this area to look like when I first came up with the idea. I also picked modern because I've not really built a lot of modern before, and I thought it would be fun to try, especially with such a neutral color. The main portion of the building wasn't too hard to put together using a gradient of black concrete, concrete powder, and wool. However, the smaller side of the building was a bit trickier, and I ended up changing it out a few different times before finding blocks for it that I actually liked. After that, I went around adding some details to make it less plain on the outside, and went ahead doing the roof soon after. I ended up adding a tower and chimney, one on each roof. Adding the tower gives a sort of fantasy castle energy, which I think helped pull the build together really well, and the chimney helps to balance out the two sides. The next to respond was my good friend Royal VR. He said, "I think a dark red brick house would be nice." So that's what I built. For Royal's house, I wanted to do something a little less house-like and more castle-like. This would not only connect back to the last build, keeping them somewhat similar so they don't look in place, but would also provide some variation to the other buildings. I went ahead and planned this one's shape before going back in with red nether bricks to get the darker brick color he requested. On the left side of the build, I also added plans for a greenhouse of sorts. A little while back, I was on a survival server with Royal, as well as some other friends. The server was just for fun, not recorded or anything, and he and I made plans to build something together that included this sort of rounded glass piece. However, we never ended up getting to it, so I thought including it here instead would be a nice reminder of that. I also just wanted to build a greenhouse because I enjoy making them. After that, I added some extra towers and flags to add some height variation and some blue, as his entire brand on YouTube is literally the color blue, before doing some extra texturing. I also asked Royal for an idea because he's done some thumbnails and edited a video for me in the past, and I wanted a way to sort of thank him and include him in my content to credit him better. So if you want to check him out, I will leave a link in the description. After finishing his build, I went ahead and moved both builds into their respective spots and fixed up anything around the spots that got broken when copy-pasting them over. After that, it was on to builds 3 and 4. For the third, I yet again messaged a friend asking what colors they'd like their house, and as I suspected from this person, I got a list of about 7 different options. So, instead of just picking one, I decided to try and use as many as I could. Now, burgundy is not exactly a color that is available in this game, and I had already used a lot of the closest options, so I decided instead to use granite as to give myself a block for the foundations, as it was still somewhat red-ish. And then I made sure to use the yellows, greens, and blues in different shades for each part of the building to really emanate a little bit of organized chaos that this friend brings whenever we hang out. Yet again, I added towers to match with the other builds, really making it obvious these are important buildings, and I also added lots of plants, including a rooftop garden, and some other little details to match this person's energy and mild scatterbrain. Then you moved on, 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 then you moved on. I also tried to add lots of details and decorations to make it match with the house that I would be building next. Next was the fourth build. Now, I was still waiting on another response, so I went ahead on working on mine next. For my build, I wanted it to be chaotic and also include builds from different projects I've done both on YouTube and in my own time. I included one of the houses from the creative video last year, link in the description, and I also included another build, the large one with the orange roof, from the same survival world I was on with Royal fairly recently. There's also my first ever survival base on a multiplayer server, and a few other builds just to make it stand out. Like the others, it also includes a tower in the back for some height variation and to keep them all matching. On the roof, I also decided to include a slightly varied version of a statue I built in one of my creative worlds. I was really surprised how quickly I was able to throw this one together, only taking about 15 to 20 minutes, which is even more surprising since it's really good, at least in my opinion. I also included a water spout coming out of the statue's mouth and flowing underneath my house, out through the tower, around the back, adding a small pond there once it was moved into its actual spot. Since this build was so big, I needed to ensure I included enough details for it to not be boring. Every angle needed to have something: a window, a chimney, depth of some sort to keep it from being a plain, flat wall. And honestly, I think I did a pretty good job of that on this build. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've moved our houses into the spots that they need to be in. So we've got this first one here, which I think is looking really good. We still do need to do the interiors on all of them, which we'll get to, but for now I just, wanted to get them in their spots, because it's like, I can do the interior after, and also I think trying to copy and paste it with all the paintings and everything else that's going in them, I think might break some stuff. So I figured I'd move them first. Then over here we have the castle-ish thing for Royal VR, which I think is actually looking really good in this spot. I think these two in particular are really nice because they provide some height and shape variety that we didn't really have before, because I didn't really do any towers or anything, or for that matter, anything with a round shape on any of the other buildings. So I think that these really provide that sort of shaping that we were kind of missing. And I think that the flags, particularly on this build, really also help that. And then if we come over here, we can take a look at these other two lovely buildings. These being number 3 and number 4, this one being mine. Now, clearly things have gotten a little out of hand with this one. And, I was kind of hoping that the out-of-hand stuff would kind of stop at this one. However, I then realized what the last build that I needed to do was. And this last build, unlike these other 4, which were built based on one person's ideas and one person's sort of suggestions, this last one is actually from 2 people. Because this one in particular, I wanted one that was going to be a little bit different, a little bit more fun, and so I messaged 2 of my friends and I was like, can you 2 agree on some colors and like a palette and stuff? And the response that I ended up getting after some deliberation between them was, I ended up going a little overboard, and I decided to do the wireframing of the building off camera first because I knew it was going to take a while and I wasn't quite sure how I wanted it shaped. So I thought I'll do this off camera and then I can actually just build it on camera. And it's just at the end of the road here, and it definitely is maybe a little bit more sizable than the rest. Yeah. Yeah. So I actually had built this a little further back, because I wasn't sure how much space I was going to need, and so I had to copy and paste it to move it forward a little bit. And when I copied and pasted it, it was about 475,000 blocks, which is, exciting. And that doesn't include the fact that this still needs a roof on top of it. So, yeah, this is going to be fun. Also, I will say, actually, I have been staring at this a little bit, and I have decided that I don't want this here. Because, to be honest, it's a little bit awkward, and I think that if I remove it, I can move the building a little closer to the road, which I think it kind of needs. I do still think I want a building like this somewhere attached to this box, maybe over here in this corner or something, just to give it a little bit more shape But I think that this is just a bad spot for it. So, I guess, let's get to work. I decided to start on the right side for a few reasons. One, it's the bigger of the two, and second is that I already had some good ideas for it. I went ahead and used some World Edit to get the base shapes in and went back through to add texturing afterwards, which on a build of this scale is very important to keep it from looking too bland. I wanted to add a lot of towers and other structures for a lot of variation in height, shape, and depth. Each piece of this building would likely include something special to it that the rest would not have. The foundation of sorts had indents in it to allow for more shading and details. The tower on top of the main foundation included a balcony, and the one in the back had some windows to allow for some natural light. On top of that, to include some extra depth and shaping, I added some rocks, small and large, around the build to make it feel less boxy and sharp. It allowed for some more rounded shapes, or at least as close as you can get in Minecraft, that is. This build ended up taking a lot longer than the rest, not just because of its size in comparison to the others, but also because of how many ideas I had running through my head. I wanted this build to stand out, and with it being large, that was a good start, but it was going to need a lot more than size to really stand out as important. I wanted to pack all the details I could into it, that is, without overdoing it, of course. Gradients, lights, windows, balconies, smaller structures jutting out of others, foundations, bridges, roofs, all of these would be very important in making this build as perfect as it can be, and would need to be worked on in equal effort to find the perfect balance between them all. I think I did a fairly good job on that with this build, but if you have any suggestions on how you might improve anything, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. So, another reason I started with the green side, I wasn't quite sure on a color palette for this side, or what I really wanted it to look like. I ended up building the main tower on this side 2 or 3 times before I was fully happy with the colors. Once both sides were finished, I went ahead and started work on the main tower, basically splitting it half and half. I used the same palettes and just did half of the tower in one and half in the other to make a clean transition. Since the roof of the main building was so large, I decided to add some small towers with similarly pointy roofs to break it up a small bit, doing one on each corner. Like the walls, the roof was the same blocks split straight down the middle. Doing the build like this allowed for great contrast between the bright pinks and deep greens. To keep with that contrast, I continued to use birch details for the pink side and dark oak for the green side. These details are probably my favorite part due to how they contrast with one another, and yet match the background they've been put on so perfectly. For whatever reason, that statue on my house inspired me to do more organics for this build, and what better to do for a magical, wicked-themed house than build 2 dragons flying around it? To be clear, I have never been able to build great organics, let alone dragons, but honestly, these two turned out alright. I used a lot of references off of Pinterest for these. I found some random dragon builds, as well as some from Gemini Tay, who was part of the inspiration for building these in the first place. These two flying around the main tower specifically was sort of reminiscent of her Empire Season 1 base, though those dragons were built in survival and were much more impressive than these. I decided that, like the building below, I wanted to have each dragon match a side of the build. However, they would instead match the opposite side to the one they were on, as to yet again get more contrast in the build. The dragons took a while and needed multiple adjustments after stepping back and looking at them from a distance, but I definitely think I learned quite a bit from building these. After that, it was time for all the interiors, and since I've been talking a lot, let's just put on some music and I'll let you watch. Alright, that is our finished build. Obviously, not everything is perfect, and we still have that large orange box on the corner, but for now, I think this will work. I plan on making this into a series of sorts, where I just build an interconnected world. So next episode we will finish off this area with some final details, as well as what I plan to put in the last empty spot, and then move on to the next ideas. But for now, here's how our lovely interiors turned out. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone!